Okay, so we all know how the fight between Andrew Tate and Chase DeMoor went down. After Tate lost a majority decision, there's a lot of people coming out and saying that Tate's a fraud. He was never a good fighter. And I wanted to chime in because there's been talk about Tate's ability to fight, and I find that there's typically one of two extreme opinions. So you'll have one opinion from his fans, his diehard fans, and they'll, especially before the Chase DeMoor fight, they would prop up Tate excessively. They would act as if he was some top tier kickboxer and he could take anybody that would step to him. So you have that one opinion. You also have the other extreme opinion from his haters. And they would say that Tate's a fraud, he was never a good fighter, he fought in Mickey Mouse promotions, padded record, and whatever else. So I wanted to give a balanced opinion about Tate's ability to fight because I'm not an Andrew Tate lover, I'm not an Andrew Tate hater. I'm neutral. I don't hate the guy, don't love him, so I wanted to give a balanced opinion and something that you can take away from all of this. Now, was Tate ever as good as his fans claim he was? Absolutely not. Tate was never a top tier kickboxer. He never reached the pinnacle of kickboxing, of combat sports. And I say this because there was a time, meaning just last week, but there was a time where Tate's fans, and this is no joke, Tate's fans would claim that he could beat Alex Pereira in a kickboxing match. Alex Pereira, I'm talking about the current UFC light heavyweight champion, and of course the former kickboxing champion. They would claim that Tate could beat Alex Pereira in a kickboxing match. Listen, if you ever thought this, you are out of your mind. Because there is no way that Tate would beat Alex Pereira in a kickboxing match. There are levels between the two. So Tate was never a top tier kickboxer. And the other thing is that Tate's kickboxing record is padded to an extent. Because I've seen fights of his and they would have the tail of the tape in the beginning and they would show Tate's record and his opponent's record. And I remember I would look at their two records and I would think to myself, you know, Andrew Tate, you shouldn't be fighting this guy because you have way more experience than him. There's levels between you two, a lot of levels, just from the experience alone. And this is going to be an easy win for you. Too easy. So Tate has fought guys that he just shouldn't have fought because it was too easy of a win for him. So Tate, he was never as good as his fans claimed he was. He was never a top tier kickboxer, and his kickboxing record is padded to an extent. Now, is he as bad as his haters claim he is? Is he a fraud? No. Andrew Tate's actually a really good fighter. And I say this because his haters will say that he was never a good fighter. He only won championships in ISCA and in Fusion. And this is just ridiculous. Listen, of course he didn't win championships in Glory or K1. He didn't win titles in those top tier kickboxing promotions. That's true. But to act as if winning a title in ISCA or in Fusion is nothing, come on. You still have to be really good to win a title in ISCA or in Fusion. Winning a title in those promotions, that's an accomplishment. You still have to be really good. You still have to have good skill, good cardio, good conditioning, good strength. You have to know what you're doing. You can't be a bum and win championships in Infusion. That's still an accomplishment. I'll give you an analogy just because kickboxing is not as popular. It's not as popular as MMA. So I'll use MMA as an analogy. In MMA, you have the UFC, which is the pinnacle of MMA. That's the top MMA promotion. But you also have other promotions, such as the PFL. Now let's say somebody is the champion. He won a title in the PFL. Forget champion, actually. Let's say somebody made it to the top 10 of the PFL in their weight class. Okay, sure. That's not the UFC top 10. He didn't make it to the top 10 of the UFC, but making it to the top 10 of the PFL is still something. You can't make it to the top 10 of the PFL if you're a bum. You have to have good grappling, good striking, good cardio, good strength. You still have to be really good as a mixed martial arts fighter to make it to the top 10 of the PFL. Again, it's not UFC level, but it's still something. You're still good to make it that far. And this is the analogy with Tate's career, his kickboxing career. Yeah, he never won a title in Glory or K1, but he won a title in ISCA, and you still have to be good to achieve that. That's still an accomplishment. So the idea that, yeah, he's not a good fighter because he only won a belt in ISCA, I'm not buying that. That's crazy. And let this be a lesson for you, because there are people, I've dealt with people that they think if they don't make it to the pinnacle of combat sports, then they're not prepared enough to defend themselves and their loved ones. And listen, it's great. If you can become a UFC champion, that's great. But it's not necessary. You don't have to get to that level to be able to defend yourself and your loved ones. You can win even 3 amateur boxing fights and get your blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Not even your brown belt, just your blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and 3 amateur boxing fights. And you'll be able to defend yourself and your family from 99% of people. You don't have to make it to the pinnacle of combat sports to prepare yourself for self-defense, to protect yourself and your loved ones. You don't have to make it to the pinnacle. You don't have to make it to that level. You can just be an amateur fighter with a few victories, a few wins, and you'll be prepared. So don't let this idea stop you, because literally they'll read comments on social media from people saying that, yeah, this guy, he only won a provincial championship. He only won a state level championship in boxing. He only has his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or he only has his blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he's just not a good fighter. And people will read those comments and they'll think, yeah, I have to make it to the pinnacle of combat sports to be able to defend myself and my loved ones. And that's not true. So don't let these comments from haters like this just stop you from getting into combat sports so that you can protect yourself and your loved ones. And I remember the first time I realized how good that even amateur fighters are. I'll tell you the time I realized how good even amateur fighters are. I remember when I first started boxing. This is the very first time I sparred. This is the very first guy I ever sparred. He was an amateur fighter. He wasn't even big. He wasn't a big guy. He was like 5'6", 5'7", something like that. He was around 5'6", 5'7". And he fought at 140 pounds. So 5'6", 5'7"-ish, fought at 140 pounds. He didn't have that many amateur fights either. He only had like 1 fight or 2 fights, maybe 3. Definitely no more than 4. He didn't have that much experience. But he did have a few amateur fights under his belt. So 5'6"-ish, 5'7", 140 pounds, around 2 amateur fights. And I remember I was sparring this guy, and we weren't going hard. We were going fast and intense and high pressure. The intensity was high, very high pressure. But we weren't just trying to take each other's heads off. We were generous to the head. But even then, I remember when I was sparring this guy, I remember thinking to myself, he was so fast, very fast, good skill. He just knew what to do in the ring. He really knew how to handle himself in the ring. And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, this guy's not punching hard. Like I said, he was going light to the head. We were going light to the head. But I remember thinking to myself, this guy's 140 pounds, around 5'6". He only has like 2 amateur fights. Yet, if he throws with power, if he really hits somebody, he's going to really hurt that person. If he's out with, for example, his mom or his wife or girlfriend or whatever, they're out somewhere and somebody tries to harass them or hurt them, and he's there, and he hits that guy with power, he hits that person with power, he's really going to hurt that person. Even though he's only like 140 pounds, and he only has like 2 amateur fights. And that's when I realized how good even amateur fighters are, let alone UFC champions. So, again, if you want to be able to defend yourself and your loved ones, you don't have to get to the pinnacle of combat sports. You can just be an amateur fighter. 2 amateur boxing fights, blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a bit of wrestling, and you're good. And the other thing is, don't let haters stop you from trying to achieve things in life. If you have ambitions in life, pursue them. Because, again, this is something I've dealt with in my personal life with people. People will always say that I want to do this thing, I want to try this thing out, but I'm worried about haters. For example, not even about combat sports, but let's say you want to make content on social media. People will say that, yeah, I want to make content on social media, but I just don't want to deal with the haters. I'm worried about dealing with hate comments. Or, again, with combat sports, I want to get into combat sports, but what if I lose a fight? They're worried about dealing with the haters after they lose a fight and people posting hate comments on their Instagram profile or whatever. Don't ever let haters stop you from pursuing your ambitions in life, because I'm telling you, if you're worried about haters, if you care about their opinions and you let that stop you from pursuing your goals in life, you're never going to achieve anything. Because I'm telling you, you're going to have haters no matter what you do. No matter what you achieve, you're going to have somebody hating on you. You can fix the hunger crisis in Africa, and you're going to have haters. Oh man, well, why only Africa? Why not Asia? You're just going to deal with this no matter what you do. So don't let the haters stop you. If you want to just get into the amateurs, you want to become just an amateur fighter, do it. Don't worry about losing. Don't worry about people saying, oh yeah, you're not a good fighter because you're only an amateur fighter. You never made it to the UFC. Don't let all that noise stop you. Just do your thing. Don't listen to the haters, because look, the people hating on you, if you're an amateur fighter, you're going to get hate comments from people that are just obese and not doing anything with themselves. They're too scared to even fight themselves. So, again, just to reiterate everything, Andrew Tate, definitely a good fighter. Not as bad as his haters say, but he's not also as good as his fans claim he was. Definitely couldn't beat Alex Pereira in a kickboxing match. That's just crazy. And again, if you want to be able to defend yourself and your loved ones, you can be even an amateur fighter and get to that level. And don't let the haters stop you from pursuing your ambitions.